Japanese car maker Nissan confirming to Yahoo Finance it is discussing possibilities for future collaboration with Honda. Following reports, the two are planning to merge. A deal between the two, who were the fourth and fifth most bought auto brands in the U.S. during 2023, will create the world's third largest car maker. It could also draw regulatory scrutiny. So here to discuss that key part of the deal here, we've got Mozelle Thompson, former FTC commissioner. Mozelle, great to have you on here. Listen, the market is swinging with this merger coming to fruition here ahead of and after this news. How likely is it for this to actually happen?
Well, one of the challenges here is that we don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet. You know, there's been talk about a holding company. There's been talk about collaboration agreements on EVs, electric vehicles. So we don't know. But there's one thing that is true is that each country where these companies operate has an antitrust regulator, and they're going to look closely at how this affects their market, their local market. For example, in the U.S., Honda and Nissan both have manufacturing plants in the U.S. Honda is a very popular brand, has top 10 car sales in the U.S., and people are going to look to see how this is going to affect them. Now, to the extent that they want to try to focus on EV production, you know, EV uptake in the U.S. has been a little bit slower than other countries. So we'll have to see how that turns out.
Is that a more effective argument for these two firms in a place like China, where we have seen EV demand be so strong and really part of what's weighed on sales for both of these companies?
Well, one of the things that distinguishes the U.S. from, for example, Europe, where China's sales of EVs are going gangbusters, is that in the U.S. we have put limits on China's ability to sell in the United States. So we have Tesla as a major competitor, and you look at other companies, the U.S. companies, Ford, GM, they have gone in for EVs, but those EV sales have been slower, partly because they're more expensive, those cars, and second, because our infrastructure is not quite up to where it needs to be for as much of an adoption as we had hoped.
So more broadly then, I'm curious about the argument that you think would be most effective from Nissan and Honda here in terms of getting regulatory approval for a merger in the United States.
Well, I think what they would need to show is that Honda and Nissan, well, one of the things, Nissan is well publicized that they're in a little bit of financial trouble.
Right.
So one of the things they could be arguing is that Nissan has a troubled outlook and therefore needs some sort of merger in order to stay competitive in the marketplace. In other words, you would lose a competitor. That could be one of the arguments that they make. The other thing, too, is they'd have to show that if, to the extent that EVs are going to become a larger part of the American auto buying public market, that this will make them more competitive and make the anti-China growth bigger and better and stronger. Those are a couple of arguments that they could make.
So how much, as a former FTC commissioner yourself, how much does that actually weigh on the decision? You mentioned, for example, the fact that there is this challenging macro backdrop for automakers. If it's either merge or fail, does that make the merger more likely to go through?
Well, it's one of the factors that they could look at as a net positive. In other words, if there's going to be a loss of American jobs and competition within the marketplace, then that could be a positive speaking for a merger. But you'd have to weigh that against the fact that you'd have essentially a higher concentration within the market, especially for competitive gas-powered cars. And that's the thing in the U.S., because don't forget, Honda is very popular in the U.S., and Nissan, while it's not as popular, also sells some top 10 cars in the U.S.
All right, well, we got to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us, Mozelle. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.